feature for any technical questions that you may have, and to use the Q&A function located below the chat feature for questions for our panelists. I want to thank Dr. Jeanette Manchester and Marielle Rosario for their assistance in putting these workshops together. And Marielle and Dr. Manchester are monitoring the chat functions to assist you as needed. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome our speaker and expert, Dr. Donna Gaffney, my friend and colleague for many years. Dr. Gaffney is a Rutgers School of Nursing alumna and an expert therapist dealing with multiple types of trauma. You can read her bio posted on our website. Dr. Gaffney, I invite you to start your presentation and to introduce your co-panelist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. I also want to introduce Millie Elia, who is going to take the last 5 minutes of today's session, and Dr. Peg Pepchek, who is a marriage and family therapist, who will be joining us and for the presentations later on as we go to the next session. So I just want to check in with everyone. I could ask the question, how are you doing? Which I'm sure a lot of people ask you, but that really doesn't answer or ask the right question. So I'm going to say, how did you sleep last night? And are you eating? And who are you talking to? So those are really the questions that that we want people to ask of you and that you would actually like to answer. So, so I just want to point out that there are several people who helped put this course together, and I am just, and here they are. Dr. Ann Hoffmeyer is from Australia and has given us some of the wonderful slides that you'll see today. Dr. Pepchek I mentioned, and Millie is going to end our session today, and just our bios. So we want you, again, I told you this for those of you who are returning, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, I'm really glad to have you here. And this is a safe space, that this is the time that you can ask questions. And if you have a question that you would really like to ask, please do so. Even in the middle of the presentation, we're going to be monitoring questions. So if something comes up from one of our participants that would be really helpful for everyone to hear, either Dr. Manchester or Dr. Morrow will chime in and ask the question out loud. And today we're going to be looking at compassion and how can we be compassionate to our colleagues, our patients. What are the actions that we need to take to be compassionate and comforting? And then how do we actually keep reaffirming this compassion that we need to keep expressing? And I love this quote from Nelson Mandela, is that our human compassion really binds us the one to the other, not in pity or patronizingly, but as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope for the future. And I think that's where we are right now. So the question is, and I'm sure this is a question that throughout this past 5-6 weeks that we have been dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and the very sick patients that many of you are caring for, or that you have family members caring for. And the question that we ask is, why do we do this work? I know some of you have shared that family members are probably saying to you, why do you do this? This is so hard. But we do this work because we have this ability to provide support and care for individuals. And I want to actually go through a couple of different terms that really help us put together a framework for how we care for people. So compassion is this feeling that we get when we see another person suffering. And in seeing that, it motivates us to help. And that is the key, that we are motivated to help, to take action. Yes, it is an affective state. We feel warm towards this person. There's empathic concern, and we want to understand their perspective. Something very interesting, though, has been happening over these past month or so. And that is the patients that we see, patients that the nurses and physicians and other healthcare providers are so very ill that we don't have a chance to interact with them as we would a patient we would have seen in another kind of setting. And add to that that they may be in a position that they're prone, or they're on a ventilator and they can't speak, or they are covered with their own masks and hats. And so we can't see them. We can't interact with them as we normally would. And this is a real issue because that's how we begin to generate the compassion towards other people. So we try to imagine who they are, but you don't have time to imagine who they are because you're so very busy. So now let me skip to the next one. And this is empathy. We want people to be empathetic. We want to be empathetic. And it's our ability to really walk in the other person's shoes, to feel the emotions of that other person. Also, we have to recognize that those are not our emotions. Those are the emotions of the other person. And they are external to us. Now, excuse me. Sometimes this, and I'm going to talk about this in the next few slides, sometimes this emotion is so powerful that we really can't separate ourselves from this. Sometimes that happens when someone in our family is sick or suffering, that we become almost helpless, but I'll talk more about this. Then there's sympathy. Sympathy is the emotional reaction that's based on the apprehension of another's emotional state or condition, and we are concerned for them. We are sorrowful. So when we offer our sympathies, for example, to someone, to a family member of someone who has died, that we aren't necessarily motivated to take action to relieve their suffering, but we can appreciate their suffering and we can share our words with them. And finally, there's the word pity. And that is really an additional appraisal of feeling concern for someone considered inferior to the self. Now, I know that that seems like a very harsh way of describing it, but let me give you an example of a client that I worked with several years ago. The couple was going through a very difficult time, and they were, the husband was just diagnosed with a long-term, ultimately fatal illness. And they didn't want to tell anyone, and they truly kept this a secret for years until he became so ill that there was no possibility of hiding it. And when I asked why they chose not to share this with people, the wife said, "We didn't want anyone to pity us." And it was a remarkable statement that she made. And then when they finally did tell people, she told me several weeks later that she was so surprised that people were so caring and so compassionate and were really offering help. So I think that sometimes we do have to help people address talking to others, to reach out, so they do actually have the feeling of wanting to be helped by others and talked to by others. Okay, so the next one. So if a healthy empathic response, 3 steps, we want to take this other person's perspective. We mentalize, so to speak. We see the situation from their perspective. We imagine it. And that could be our abstract propositional knowledge. In other words, it's the cognitive aspect. Then we have self-awareness, and that means that we can separate ourselves from that other person. Okay, that person is ill and struggling, but that's not me. And then finally, we want to provide some emotional regulation for ourselves. And that means we don't get swept into, excuse me, we don't get swept into their emotional state, which then will render us, challenged. So just some, this is a very, looking at the way empathy and compassion interact is becoming a very new area. Tanya Singer from the Max Planck Institute in Berlin has done the lion's share of work in this. So there's a lot of new ways of looking at empathy and how it relates to compassion. So we actually have two separate networks that work, or neurologically, that are working at the same time. The empathic experiences activate similar networks as the compassion network. So we empathize with a person who is in pain, and the brain actually shows activation of similar circuits as the brain of the suffering person. So we actually have that same response that the sufferer does, but we can separate it by our self, other distinction, and our emotional regulation, and that is really key. Sorry. So that it's really essential to our understanding of that regulation and compassion we build. So we act on the desire to help, and that has been a long time in our field. I just read some wonderful, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my dry throat. I read some wonderful things about World War I nurses who were resourceful, smart, on the battlefield, but somehow because of the headgear that they wore, they were considered quote unquote angels. And that's sort of where that whole thing began with, angels of mercy and angels and heroes and all of that kind of thing, which some people don't like, but it seems that the media has decided that that's what we should be called. So when we act on the desire to help, there's a couple of things that happen. It is a source of positive transformation in people's lives and helps us feel very satisfied. And we get a sense of fulfillment. We've met a duty, we've met an obligation. We enjoy actually helping. Now, it's very interesting. These citations are not from the nursing literature. These citations are from research that's been done when family caregivers are very active in taking care of a chronically ill person or a veteran, that these are the positive things that they experience. And I don't know if that's something that, sorry, I'm just moving a little too quickly. We should actually have some work being done in our field on this, how compassion makes us feel. So the science of compassion, and there is a science, two distinct neural pathways that are not in opposition, the empathy side and the compassion side. And compassion action activates pleasure circuits. There is a feeling of really a satisfaction, and it's a reward system. And that has to do with the dopamine signaling areas in the brain. And contemporary MRI studies show that the neurological areas activated with compassion include the medial orbital frontal cortex and ventral striatum. So if it's linked to reward and affiliation processing with oxytocin, which is a well-being neurotransmitter, and vasopressin receptors, those are the reasons why we get a very positive effect towards those who are suffering. Compassion activates networks that provide a protective action from stress. And I want you to remember this because you've all heard the word compassion fatigue, or the term compassion fatigue. And the newest research actually says that that's a misnomer, that we don't become fatigued from compassion. We become fatigued because of the empathic distress that we're feeling. More on that in a few slides. We know that the heart rate decelerates, and it's been shown in situations in where there's been compassionate behaviors. One of the things that we can do is compassion training. That increases resilience, and you'll hear more about resilience next session. It lowers the stress hormones in the blood and saliva, that would be the cortisol, and certainly strengthens the immune response. So being compassionate is actually good for you. And we should not become fatigued from it because it does so many great things for our body. So let me give you the new terminology. Empathic distress fatigue. This is a strong, aversive, and self-oriented response to the suffering of others, accompanied by the desire to withdraw, to pull back from that situation, to disconnect from those who are suffering, and adopting depersonalizing behaviors in order to protect yourself from excessive negative feelings. Now, that sounds a lot like some of the trauma responses that people get, but this is actually because of the empathy, the distress that you're feeling, the empathic distress. And if you have enough of that, that's when you become fatigued. So compassion doesn't cause fatigue. Research shows that, that empathic distress fatigue is triggered when the self-other distinction is blurred. In other words, you see yourself or a family member in the bed of the person that you're caring for. And that experience of distress, you are feeling as your own. And so we are unable to separate out those two. Without the ability to regulate our emotions, this self-other distinction is blurred. And we absorb another's pain, negative emotions, and that leads to the empathic distress, fatigue, and it triggers an intense neurological response, overwhelming pain and distress, and the withdrawal behaviors. And that is certainly not what we want to have. We want to be able to really feel the joy, the satisfaction that we feel when we're caring for someone. A number of authors have really done some remarkable work, actually in the area of compassion fatigue, but some of it begins to sound a little bit about which is what we should be doing for empathic distress fatigue. And that is focusing your empathy. Your empathy really helps others, your empathy for others, helps you to do your job. It is important to take good care of your feelings and your thoughts and to say to yourself, this is not me. This is not my family member. I can care for this person. I can be empathetic to this person. But it doesn't mean that it's me. I am separate from this individual. So we want to monitor our thoughts. And when we see ourselves moving into that direction of feeling helpless, feeling like you can't make a difference, then it's time to step back and really, really think about what your feelings are. The most resilient clinicians are those who know how to turn their feelings to work mode when they go to work and then turn them off when they leave work. And we actually have some of that automatically built into our current COVID-19 pandemic. Those of you who are working in ICU, CCU, critical care areas, or in any area where you are likely to be in contact with somebody who might be coronavirus positive or has the COVID-19, you come home, you take off your scrubs, your uniform, whatever you're wearing, and you throw them in the laundry. And you wash your face, take a shower. That is very healthy for two reasons. One is you are preventing yourself from contracting or the virus, doing as much as you can. The second is that you are shedding that work experience and leaving it at the door. So my recommendation is to make it into a process where you follow certain steps that you take every single day. You come home. If you don't have to bring anything in from the car, or however you're traveling to work, do that. Take off your clothes, shed your clothes. And as you are changing your clothes, think about that you are leaving behind all of those emotions that are attached to those patients and to your colleagues. And then put the laundry on, take your shower, put on some nice fragrant lotion, and then go into your home or your apartment and feel that you are with family, with or whoever your partners are you're leaving, or if you're alone, put on some music. You want your home to become the sanctuary away from. So those activities that you take to stay healthy are the very same ones that keep you emotionally healthy as well. It's not denial. That off work mode is not denial. It really is a way for you to protect yourself. It's a coping strategy. It's a way to get maximum protection while working and maximum support while resting. And I actually have a little card that I'm going to give to Dr. Manchester to post. So it actually tells you what to do and how to keep those actions going. And also tells you 10 things to do every day and how to be good at switching between work mode and off work mode. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. Now, here are some.
Dr.
Yes.
Gaffney, we had some responses to your question earlier, if you'd like to
Sure,
hear them.
absolutely. Yes, go ahead.
So some of our participants are not sleeping so well. They have a lot of anxiety and feel as if their mind is constantly running. Others are sleeping okay, but their eating is not good. Some said eating horribly, others eating too much.
Okay, so I've heard this a lot. So I think you are the people that ask those questions. Thank you for asking the questions, because I'm sure you're speaking for everybody else in the room, so to speak. At the end of this session, you will see links to two apps for your phone. One is called Calm and one is called Headspace. And Calm is great for sleep. It's specifically for sleep. So it's the sound of rain, the sound of ocean waves. So that's one thing that can help. But the other things that I recommend are no phone the last 30 minutes, no phone in bed, no phone being on the phone the last 30 minutes. Turn off the news, watch something or listen to music that is conducive to you sort of de-escalating and calming down. So when you do those things, you're really setting the stage for sleep. And so make sure that you have your surroundings, your protocol for going to sleep, so to speak, is the same every single night. So think about music that you really like, or whether you want to try one of these apps. Turn off the TV, no news after, I say 8 o'clock at night, but it might even, you've been living the news all day, so you probably don't need to hear any more of that. And your mind does begin to race. And this is also a good time to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is when you really focus on a specific activity or something to watch and look at. And then as those thoughts, Dr. Siegel, Dan Siegel has some wonderful activities, and I can also post those. As the thoughts come into your consciousness, you don't judge those thoughts. Like, why am I thinking about this? I should be trying to go to sleep. You just push them aside and say, it's okay, I had those thoughts. So we'll also post some exercises for you to do. And I think Millie has also several of those. So sleep needs to have a scheduled protocol and you do the same thing every night. Think about those of you who have families that sort of sleep training for kids is the same thing. You want to have a specific activity that you do in sequence that allows you to go to sleep. The second,
Dr. Gaffney?
Yes.
There's a question or a comment basically
sleeping
about,
more, right?
well, about sleeping and not being able to have a regular sleep schedule. So for instance, one of our students is working full-time as well as going to school full-time in a local emergency department to support themselves, and a family member who's ill and was, for instance, last night pulled into work for short staffing and has an exam in about 9 hours and has not slept in 27 hours. So this we may find as something that happens particularly during this period.
Exactly. You have to make sure in some way that you get several hours. And I hope after this webinar that he or she has a chance to get some hours of sleep. There's been a lot of research on not sleeping enough hours, and how that, and it's very difficult to make up for it. Sometimes people say, oh, I'll catch up on, on my next day off. You don't ever really catch up. You have to schedule your sleep just like you would schedule any other eating or take other kinds of things that you would do to take care of yourself. So I recommend that you really try to get at least 2 hours of sleep, and if you can get more. I don't know what this person's situation is, but if you have to do some caregiving or for a family member, ideally it would be better to sleep at least 4 hours or 5 hours if you have the opportunity to do that. And I think this is going to be coming up more, but I think you begin to reframe how you look at sleep, not as a luxury, but as a priority, because that is what actually contributes to your own immune health. And it really will help you focus. And I remember being in graduate school thinking that I could pull, quote unquote, an all-nighter and still be fresh as the day to take the exam. That doesn't work. So I think that it's really, really important to schedule those sleep hours and make sure that you don't push yourself. In other words, if it's, well, I'll just do one more thing. I'll do one more thing. I hear a lot of family members talking about that, and then you wind up staying up too late, and then you can't get to sleep. So I don't know if that helps, but was it, and there was about a question about food, right?
Well, there are a couple of comments.
Okay.
Some people were saying they're not eating well, some are eating too much, and then others asking how to cope with their anxiety and that they don't always have a choice about their sleep, and that after working 14 hours, for instance, sleeping only 4 or 5 hours is not enough, which is what you're saying. Yes.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. You should have, an adult should have 7 hours minimum of sleep every night to be able to function. 8 would be great, but it's not always possible. So I think that if it's not possible because of your schedule, look at your schedule and decide how you can best work in those hours. So, for example, a client of mine was working, she did, I think she did 48 hours in a row. And she was on call. And one of the first things she did when she came home was went to sleep for at least 4 hours. Then she got up and did some things, had some food, and then slept again for another 2 to 3 hours. So I think that when you come home, look at your schedule and look at how many hours you have and what you have to do, and know that sleep is your first priority. If you can, if you have to care for children or a family member, that makes it more difficult. And of course, given our stay-at-home regulations now, you can't bring in somebody else to help with caring for an individual unless you're living in a family situation with other people who can be caregivers. But if you can look at that block of time and then choose what will work out best for you, Um, I think that's really crucial. I don't know if that, and again, without seeing the block of time, if I were in my office and this person was talking to me, I'd say, well, when do you get home? And when do you have to go back to work? And what do you have to do? So think about those things and then plug in the hours of sleep. There's such a thing called power naps, but when you're exhausted, power naps don't always do the trick. You have to really put more, make sure you log in more time that you're sleeping. But I think that reframing how you see your priorities is really important, that you do have to get sleep. The younger you are, the easier it is, but don't let that make it a reason for you to not sleep at all. Henry, what was the other question? It was about sleeping.
Well, I guess, I think you've addressed, a lot of these questions around sleep. Another person has anxiety, what to do about their anxiety, and
Okay, so for anxiety, the first thing that you're going to do is look at what you're eating and drinking. How much coffee, how much caffeine, how much tea, chocolate, any of those things do not help anxiety. So you really want to take a look at your diet. You also want to make sure that you're having, and this sort of gets to the healthy food kind of question, anything with B12 in it is very healthy and helps with anxiety as it promotes a sense of well-being. So anything dark green leafy vegetables, that really helps. And anxiety, also sort of paying attention to when you're feeling anxious and what triggers it. What is it? Simply going to work? Is it coming home and having a lot of things to do? Sort of do a little self-assessment and see when you are feeling so anxious. And breathing exercises, I can't even begin to tell you how important it is for you to do some of these self-care behaviors. Breathing, different kinds of it, square breathing, the 4-7-8 breathing that you had the first session. When you do the breathing, you're changing the way your body is processing taking the breaths in and taking and exhaling. And you're so focused on your breath that it doesn't allow you to focus on the anxiety. So that is something that is really, really helpful. And we'll actually post some other exercises that are really important for anxiety. I don't recommend alcohol or medication for the anxiety because it's situational anxiety in many cases. And for some of you who are students and working full-time, you've got school demands as well as work demands. So you've got a lot of things going on at the same time. So again, do that self-assessment, pay attention to when you start to feel anxious. And when you do, switch to something that either a breath exercise or doing something that gives you comfort and calm. I recommend if you have a pet, being with an animal, a small child who's not crying, hopefully, but something that soothes you. So also when you're doing that self-assessment for anxiety, do that inventory about what calms you, what makes you feel better. And so we'll post more of those activities. Millie and I will talk about some of the things that you can do to feel better. But again, start with the self-assessment, what triggers your anxiety. And about the food thing is comfort food, of course. Those carbs are what really allows us to feel better. And I don't think all you have to do is look at Facebook and Instagram and see how many people are making their bread recipes and posting the pictures, but know that too much of that, it doesn't really help. It's really about eating the very balanced diet, especially with a lot of dark green leafy things and protein. The problem is when you're eating the carbs, your blood sugar shoots up and then it crashes. If you're eating protein, you have a much more gradual slowdown or decline in your blood sugar, which allows you to then not crash. And that, and of course, makes you, when you crash, makes you very tired. So let me go on, and Anne-Marie, chime in again when we have any more questions, because these are really important for all of you. And it also gives us a good sense for the kinds of materials that we can post that will help you. So, another way that compassion really helps us is that we feel less vindictive towards others. We feel more compassionate towards our coworkers. We see the organization in a positive light. We feel joy. We feel contentment. And compassionate people seem to be those people who are very socially adept, making them less vulnerable to loneliness. And if any of you are living alone, or in an apartment, a dorm room, or do not have family members around, you really need to take care of your loneliness or aloneness and make sure that you connect with other people. It's so easy to use the phone. I know that. It's easy to text. It's easy to, post on Facebook. But this is the time when actually hearing another person's voice is really, really helpful. Or a short video where someone is talking to you. We really need to hear other people's voices at this time. So let's look at some strategies to reduce empathic distress. This is actually, we talked about some of this already. We need to be responsive to our own suffering and acting to alleviate and prevent it. And we want to foster that through 4 strategies: compassion, self-care practices, self-compassion, and compassion leadership in healthcare cultures. This is really important. Dr. Mara, when the question came in about that sometimes the scheduling doesn't allow us to sleep, I wanted to scream out, this needs to be addressed with administration. It's nurses and other healthcare providers have been operating under such dire circumstances, not having the equipment to be protected, being in a situation where there are so many more patients than they've ever seen in a particular setting. And we need to rely on our healthcare administrators and leaders to make sure that the staff is really getting everything they need. And that is having leaders that are compassionate and understanding what needs to be done, not necessarily suspending or firing people for taking action, which is, I'm sure you've all heard about, but to really ask for and tell people the needs that you have. And you can do that in a way that promotes healing and promotes compassion for the entire staff. We'll talk more about that. And here's where the sleeping plan comes in, for you to develop a self-care plan. Much more effective than an ad hoc approach. So that self-care plan needs to be plugged right into your schedule. Even if it's 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes you deserve that will help you then move through the rest of the day. And it's not just about pleasure. It's about self-discipline, self-awareness, accountability, motivation to make better life choices. So doing your self-assessment, how much are you sleeping? What are you eating? Writing it down is really important, because otherwise you hold it in your head and you keep worrying about it. Oh, I'm not sleeping enough. I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm eating all the wrong things, or I'm eating too much junk food. Put it down so you can see it in front of you. And that way, when you begin to change some of those behaviors, you have a real sense of accomplishment. And enhance your compassion literacy. That's that healthy balance of compassion for others and compassion for oneself. You can't keep giving and not get anything back. And that's where colleagues in your healthcare settings will be really important. Compassion training is a new concept that is taking off. It doesn't reduce or remove negative emotions. Those are there. We have to acknowledge them. We have to name them. We have to own them. but it does increase activation in the brain areas associated with love, affiliation, positive emotions, hope, and certainly reward. And as it's a protective factor to empathic distress. So here's the question you're all thinking. I am not sleeping. I don't want to go to work. Or when I get to work, I'm already exhausted. Is it burnout? Is it stress? Is it crisis? Is it trauma? Is it secondary trauma? Is it empathic distress? We'll begin to know that as we sort of move through the rest of the sessions. You'll begin to get a sense for that. But just briefly, and I'll talk more about burnout later, burnout is when it's the organization that you have, that is not giving you the support that you need. And that, so it's very much organizationally based. In other words, you've had it with the people, the place, that kind of thing. Stress is the nature of the patients that you're caring for. Crisis could be when you're dealing with patients who are dying, and you're the only one there, and you know that the family wants to see you. It's hard to take time to talk to the family. Would be secondary trauma, and we're going to be talking more about that in the next session. You are witnessing very traumatic experiences, and some of you have had that experience in your healthcare setting, but it's the volume and the sensory overload that you are that is different. So we'll talk more about how to deal with that. Or is it empathic distress, when your empathy for this patient is so powerful, so strong, and you begin to identify with that person and you can't separate yourself? That then leads to empathic distress. So the key to surviving, as little as 5 minutes a day. Those are your 5 minutes. Go to a place, and I know that last week we talked about finding sanctuary in a renewal room. Okay, that's probably not going to happen where you are, but when you go to a hallway or go in front of an open a window where you can look out, or at home when you have a corner, a chair, someplace that is yours for 5 minutes, that has a very positive effect, measurable changes. And that begins to regulate the anterior insula activity. And the negative effect and the stress is reduced. Emotional regulation is enhanced, and it increases pro-social meaning helping other people, compassionate behavior. And the other things that we do, and we've already talked about this, but I'm going to say it again because you need to hear this a lot. And therefore, making signs and putting it in your kitchen or putting it in your home is a good thing. Get more rest if you can. Even 20 minutes more rest, you begin to give that to yourself. Eat healthier food, the vitamin B foods, so important. Here's a new one. Declutter your personal space. There is something remarkable that happens when you clear out things and allow for space around your house, your apartment, your room. Declutter. And if you spend, and I'm sure that you're thinking, oh, I don't have time to clean. I don't have time to declutter. I don't have time to put things away. 10 minutes a day to just put some things away. I have to tell a funny story that when I was talking to Dr. Manchester the other day as we were going through a test run of the webinar, and she got a look at my desktop. Not pretty. So this morning, I decided that I was going to spend 10 minutes and clean up my desktop. I feel so much better. So that happens in every aspect of your life. Declutter your personal space. Spend time alone or in reflection. Now, there are some things that that can really promote that sense of reflection. Looking at water, looking at waves, looking at mountains. So when you find something that gives you that sense of calm, use that as your way to sort of move into that moment where you can spend time alone and in reflection. Seek personal counseling or life coaching. This is a tough, tough time for those of you who are, for all of us in nursing. For those of us who aren't on the front lines, we feel guilty that we're not there. And for those of you who are on the front lines, you know, you're struggling with an incredible, incredible workload, and the way that you need to take care of yourself sort of takes a backseat to all of this. So talking to someone is very helpful. And there have been a number of individuals who have offered pro bono services to talk for a few times to 1 or 2, 3 sessions for anyone who's interested. And there'll be an contact information for you at the end of this. So just sometimes talking it through with someone on the phone really is very helpful. And I urge you to not, I think we talked about this on the first day, that there are people that are very helpful for you to talk to, and there are people that may not be very helpful. If you talk to family members, what they want to do is rescue you from your work situation. They want to take care of you. They don't want you to feel the way you're feeling. So their way of solving the problem is, well, maybe you shouldn't do this work anymore. That's not solving the problem at all. There's a reason why you went into the nursing profession, and that's not going to change. This is more difficult now, but so you may find that talking to family members, not so helpful. There might be other people that you can talk to that is helpful. But again, when we talked about toxic relationships several webinars ago, we also mentioned that that those people may make you feel worse. Or someone who says, well, if I were you, I would do X. And they're not you, so they really can't give that advice. You want someone to be present, to just sit and to listen, and to allow you to cry, to get frustrated, to get angry, and just listen. No judgment, nothing, just to be there to listen. And also, you want to do any activity that supports or energizes or soothes or inspires. Do that inventory. What is it that makes you feel energized or soothed or supported? What are your activities? And I know it's hard to say, but I don't have time to do this. But 5-minute increments, 10-minute increments where you give to yourself is really the most important thing. And of course, meditation practice is very, very effective self-care strategy in both the personal and professional setting. And if you need to take time at work, 5 minutes where you can just do some self-care, leave bedside, ask a colleague, tell this person that you just need 5 minutes. Go to a space where you can feel safe and do some breathing exercises. That 5 minutes will really serve you very well. And now just a little bit about how we relate to others and how our administrations and leaders, we would like them to respond to us. We want to use compassion as a guide to relating to others. There's no better compass to help you navigate relationships in your work, your personal life, and stay on course. Leadership is really beyond good intentions. It requires action. So when we're talking about not getting enough sleep, that's the time for a leader, administrator, to be especially aware of that. But also for any of you to say, several of us are having a really hard time sleeping or can't get in enough sleep. Is there anything that we can do to change that? There might not be, but you want that person to listen to you. Good leadership is, in fact, an act of compassion. Compassionate leader really takes responsibility for the growth and development of others, so they can understand and really solve their own challenges. And I think several, maybe last time, Millie pointed out that when you want to express yourself to your leader or teacher or someone who is making decisions about what you have to do in your work or school life, we're so programmed not to just tough it out that finally we get to the point where we just blow up and get angry. It's far better to address the issues early on so that you can take a breath and say, I just need to talk to you about something. I'm really struggling with fill in the blank, and I want to be sure that you knew, and I'd love it if we could talk about some solutions. It may not happen, but you are then taking a leadership role in caring for your own health and well-being. I think that's really, really important. So if we're struggling with a colleague at work, if things aren't going well, if you feel that there's imbalance in assignments, these are all issues that you had before the COVID-19 pandemic. It doesn't mean that they're going to go away. That the people who took advantage or bullied or any of those kinds of things are still going to do that. So, but it's really important for you to take a lead on this. So you approach this person with genuine concern for the way they're acting, and then to find a constructive way forward. We actually have to suspend judgment and listen to understand what led to that situation. So if you feel that your assignment, for example, is much heavier than other people, you go to that individual who made the assignment and you say, I just need to express this to you. I'm very uncomfortable with what's going on. I have, 5 patients, and I see other people only have 2 or 3, and I just wanted to point that out and to see if there's something we could do about it. So we want that person to hear us and to listen. And again, if there can't be, you might find a reason why that is the case, or you might be able to problem solve together. In one situation, one of my clients said, she just blew up at an individual who had only 2 patients or was sitting there and not talking to families. And she was right, but by blowing up and becoming angry, she shut down communication with that individual and shut down the communication with the person who was an administrator in that particular unit. So better to collect the facts, point it out, and actually come up with and bring a solution if you can think about that. So then you begin to take action, and you don't feel like you're the one that is being really put upon by other people. You don't know why they made that assignment, or you don't know what led them to make those choices, but at least you can begin to address that. And that begins actually to strengthen our relationships with others and influences our healthcare culture in very productive ways to improve patient outcomes and certainly our collegial well-being with our colleagues and our peers. And it also fosters opportunity for growth. But this doesn't mean we sanction poor performance or behavior. You can see Anne wrote this, she's with you and behavior. And I think that it really is significant for us to point it out in a way before you're at the breaking point. When you first notice something, it could be something the way the materials are organized or assignments, anything that you're having a response to. Now, by you identifying that also begins to give you a sense for what you can do, that you're not powerless in the situation. And then you bring it to somebody else or you talk to a colleague, and you're not powerless in the situation, because the powerlessness is what also that feeds into the anxiety.
Dr. Gaffney, we're getting comments how much people are enjoying this. We have about 5 minutes left,
Okay,
so I
great.
just wanted to give you a heads up. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good timing, because here we are at the resource section. So these 4 resources are really great. Loving kindness meditation, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, loving kindness means that it's about being kind to yourself and taking care of yourself. And that's really what you need to do. Chris Germer does a lot of work in the area of self-compassion. The Schwartz Center for Compassionate Healthcare, I don't know if many of you know about this, is located in Boston. It's a wonderful website with lots and lots of good suggestions. And then you can download this free ebook on compassion, bridging practice and science by Tanya Singer, the person I mentioned to you, who's from Germany. And by the way, let me just mention something since I'm talking about Germany. Germany has a lot of cases, but very, very few deaths compared to the rest of the world. And they attribute that to the nursing care that was given to those patients. And I've written to them to try to find out, exactly what is going on. So with that, but I don't know if any of you heard that, but I'm going to really try to dig into that a little bit more, and I'll keep you updated. So let me see. All right, so these are 4 links that will really help you. Now here are your apps for your phone. Calm is the one that has the rainwater and the ocean sounds, and that's the you'll see that on the web page, the screen. If you want, you can buy a membership to Calm, but I find that you can actually get a lot of free sounds and images that really are very helpful. Headspace is the one that is offered free for healthcare providers. You just go onto their website, and it's under COVID-19, headspace.com, COVID-19. They want you to just put your upload your credentials, and you can get on board for free. I think it's maybe for the rest of this year, and it's a great app to use. So just start little, only 5 minutes a day, and let me just see some of the questions that might have.
So Donna,
Yes.
there's a question around students setting limits when asked to work extra shifts right now at the hospital. They feel like they should say yes, but obviously it impacts their stress level and their ability to complete their coursework.
Yeah, this is when you have to really practice saying no, and you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping the overall situation. And I think that if you can say no, I don't. The other thing that happens is the more you say yes, the more people ask you. You might have noticed that. So you simply say, I really can't do it because I have X, Y, and Z. And that could be an exam coming up, and a paper that is due, classwork. You do have to say no. So that's a short answer to a very complex question. And some of the things that you talked about in the very first session when we used Tim O'Brien's book, the things that you carry, that's actually the beginning of your inventory. What are you carrying with you to soothe you, to comfort you? What are you carrying on your shoulders that becomes very difficult for you to handle? And I think that, you keep taking care of you as well as your patients, as well as your colleagues and your family. If you can start today by taking 5 minutes, you will lock in the ability to keep taking care of yourself. You might want to start with a sleep routine for today. That's something that you can do. Start with your inventory today. your assessment when you get anxious. Find out what happens when you begin to feel that anxiety and how can you feel better. And as I said, we'll post some other articles and exercises for you, but there's lots on this, the links that will be up pretty soon, I believe. And so keep moving in that direction. And again, here's just some of the books, references that we use to give you some background in this. And let us know how you're doing. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to email. We can only build a webinar for you during this very challenging time during the COVID-19 pandemic rather, if we know the kinds of things that you're dealing with. I will tell you that Facebook and social media has been a really remarkable way for us to get some insight into what you all need, because people are feeling very open and taking responsibility and actions for really identifying how they're feeling. And that's really the best thing that we can do, the best that you can do. So if you tell us, then we can help you. Anything else?
Will Millie be doing the exercise? I know we're a little past the end of our time, but if people want to stay and have Millie do that, I think it would be beneficial.
That would be
to
great.
them. And then I have some closing instructions for everyone after Millie.
Okay,
So
great.
thank you.
Great. Millie, can you go ahead?
Millie, you're on mute, so please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I had a few things. Good morning. First, and thank you for joining us today and staying to hear this portion. I do appreciate it. I had a few things planned to go through with you today, but I think I'm going to hit on something that I really wanted to make available to you, and that is some grounding practices that I have found, and many people have told me, mentally prepare them for their day and help them to get through their day. So what I'd like to leave you with, and I'll make this very brief, and I can talk more about this to you at a later point if you'd like, but I'd like to invite you to think about, upon waking, setting and sticking to a morning ritual, a routine. There's something comforting and grounding in rituals and routines. During COVID and other life challenges, life can become very hectic, chaotic, and feel rushed. And we have a tendency, and I include myself in that, in waking up almost ready to jump and get going as quickly as possible. I invite you to just set a few moments, even before coming out of bed, to set your intention for what your day will be like and what you plan on accomplishing. And if you set only one intention for your day, that can be all you need to start your day. I also ask you to consider questions like, how do I want to show up today? What do I need to do? And how do I want to be doing while I'm doing it? How do I want to be while I'm doing it? Also, setting some intentions like, today I will practice kindness towards myself and others. Today I will practice forgiveness for myself and others. Or even, today I will let go of perfection and accept myself and others. Are thoughts that can start your day, putting you in the right frame of mind for whatever comes. Similarly, setting a mantra throughout the day can keep your mind grounded and calm. A mantra is a word or a sound repeated internally to aid in concentration or meditation. So saying to yourself throughout the day things like, all is well, or I breathe in calm and breathe out anxiety. Matching that to your breath and becoming aware of your thoughts can help you during these trying and challenging times. And that's all the time I think I have for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll leave additional resources for today's session online. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. That was wonderful. And thank you to Dr. Gaffney for your rich discussion and expert guidance. It was very helpful. We see many comments to that effect in the chat and in the Q&A. And I want to invite everyone to join us again on Monday for our next webinar, When Bearing Witness is Too Much to Bear. These materials are all posted on the website, on the School of Nursing webpage. The homepage, you can click and it will take you to the website where everything is posted and where you can also register. Please also take the time to complete the evaluation that's emailed to you in order to receive your continuing education credit. We thank Dr. Gaffney and Millie and the rest of the panel for their expertise, and we look forward to our next webinar. Please stay safe and be well and take good care. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.